I still remember the moment the call came. It was just past 10 in the evening, the kind of quiet that makes every sound feel amplified. Daniel, my son, was gone, or at least that's what they told me. A car crash on a lonely stretch of Highway 9 late at night. No witnesses, and the police calling it fatigue. My heart felt like it had been hollowed out in an instant. I kept replaying every last conversation we'd had over the past year, wondering if I'd missed something, any hint that he might be in danger. Sitting in my living room in suburban Boston, the evening light casting long shadows across the furniture, I tried to make sense of it. My memories of Daniel, his laughter over burnt pancakes, his endless curiosity about everything from software to baseball, felt both painfully vivid and impossibly distant. But something didn't sit right. Vanessa, his wife, was there, sobbing just enough to seem convincing. But the edge in her eyes suggested that grief wasn't her only performance. The way she lingered over the expensive black dress she had chosen for the funeral, the almost practiced tilt of her head, the subtle way she avoided talking about the crash, it all added to that nagging unease I couldn't shake. Then came the reading of the will. My hands trembled as I listened to the lawyer enumerate Daniel's estate, the beach house, the tech company he had poured his life into, all gone to Vanessa. My chest tightened, a mixture of disbelief and rising suspicion. And then, a small, almost absurd surprise: the old farmhouse in Pine Valley, the one Daniel rarely mentioned, would be mine. Vanessa wrinkled her nose, muttering something about that rundown place, and I caught a flicker of something I couldn't quite name, maybe fear, maybe calculation. It was the first thread of a puzzle I wasn't sure I was ready to unravel. As I packed a small bag for the drive, my mind kept returning to the farmhouse, to Daniel's quiet visits there over the years, and to the sense that he had left something behind, something meant for me to find. I didn't know what awaited, but I knew that this journey would be more than a simple trip to settle affairs. It was the beginning of uncovering secrets, truths that had been hidden beneath layers of appearances, and possibly the very answers Daniel had been leaving for me all along. The drive to Pine Valley felt both familiar and strange, a quiet 3-hour stretch along winding roads flanked by dense pine forests. Each turn brought back memories of Daniel as a boy, racing along these same paths, backpack bouncing against his shoulders, laughter echoing in the crisp air. But this time, I was alone. The car silent except for the soft hum of the engine and my own thoughts, spiraling between grief and unease. Something about this trip felt different, as though the farmhouse itself was waiting, holding secrets I had yet to uncover. When I finally saw the farmhouse, the sight struck me with a peculiar mix of nostalgia and unease. The weathered wood siding had faded to a soft gray. The wraparound porch sagged slightly in the middle, and the creaky front door hung slightly ajar, as if inviting me inside or warning me. Sunlight filtered through the dense pines, casting long shadows across the lawn, and a faint smell of pine sap mingled with the earthy scent of the forest. I parked, took a deep breath, and stepped onto the porch, feeling the familiar uneven boards beneath my feet. Inside, the air was stale, yet not abandoned. A faint trace of coffee lingered, rich and warm, as though someone had just poured a cup. My eyes fell on the reading chair, positioned to face the driveway, a notebook resting beside it. My heart skipped. This was Daniel's habit: to watch, to record, to notice. Flipping open the notebook, I saw rows of license plates, dates meticulously documented, some just days before his supposed accident. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the cheerful boy I remembered with the meticulous, secretive man he had become. The kitchen offered more subtle clues. The nearly full coffee carafe, the scent of fresh grounds, the faint impression of someone moving through the space. I realized someone had been here recently, maybe even preparing for my arrival. My chest tightened, a mix of fear and curiosity. Why would Daniel keep such precise records? Why hadn't he shared any of this with me? My reflections drifted to Vanessa, her polished grief still lingering in my mind. Could she have known more than she let on? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. Every room held traces of Daniel's presence and absence books slightly out of place. The faint scent of his cologne, a photograph leaning against the wall that I hadn't noticed in years. Memories interwove with suspicion. The way he had grown distant over the past year, canceling dinners and avoiding family gatherings, now seemed like preparation, as if he had been safeguarding something, preparing for a time when only I could understand. By the time I reached the upstairs bedroom, a subtle tension had built, a quiet insistence that I pay attention, observe, and think. The farmhouse, with its familiar creaks and shadows, was more than a home, it was a message, a puzzle Daniel had left for me. I felt both connection and foreboding, knowing that what I was about to uncover might change everything. Stepping back to the living room, I could almost hear his presence, urging me forward. Somewhere within these walls, the answers and perhaps the confrontation awaited. I froze as I heard the crunch of gravel on the driveway. My heart raced. Vanessa was coming, her presence as deliberate as a shadow, moving through a well-rehearsed scene. My first instinct was to hide, to retreat, and wait for her to leave. But a small voice inside reminded me that Daniel had left these clues for a reason. He had anticipated this moment. I couldn't allow fear to dictate my actions, not when the truth was at stake. Vanessa stepped through the doorway with the confidence of someone accustomed to control. Her black dress, impeccable hair, and carefully measured movements gave nothing away. Yet every detail seemed calculated, every gesture purposeful. I could almost see the mental gears turning behind her poised expression, the subtle calculation of risk and timing. She wasn't just a widow, she was a strategist, and I needed to be equally mindful. I told myself to remain calm, to blend my curiosity with caution. Every step I took across the familiar floorboards was measured, every glance deliberate. I observed her as I would a chess opponent, noting the flicker of her eyes when they landed on the reading chair, the pause in her breath when her gaze swept over the coffee still warm on the counter. She expected me to react, to show surprise or fear, and I refused to give her that satisfaction. My mind wandered to Daniel. He had always been meticulous, always thinking several moves ahead. The evidence of his planning was everywhere: the notebook by the chair, the carefully arranged observations of license plates, the traces of activity in the farmhouse. Vanessa may have believed she controlled the narrative, but Daniel had left a map for me, a trail leading to his secrets. Realizing this bolstered my resolve. Every inch of the room seemed charged with tension. I noticed the slight tremor in her hand as she reached for an innocuous object, the way her posture shifted when she thought I wasn't observing. Each micro-movement told a story of calculation, deception, and impatience. I had to absorb it all, store it away mentally, while projecting the calm composure she expected from me. A twist of curiosity mingled with fear. What had Daniel uncovered? What had Vanessa been hiding, and how much of it was still within reach? My internal debate churned: confront her directly or wait for the next sign, the next clue? I decided on a strategy of subtle observation, letting her speak through her actions and expressions while I pieced together the story she did not want revealed. As the confrontation reached its peak tension, I could feel the weight of history and loss pressing down, yet also a strange exhilaration. Every decision, every pause, every careful step brought me closer to the truth Daniel had left for me. I knew the farmhouse held more than memories. It held evidence, and perhaps even a recorded confession. I had to find it, and the next moments would test everything I thought I knew about fear, courage, and the lengths a mother would go to protect her child. The stage was set, the players revealed, and I understood with a chilling clarity that the next discovery, Daniel's hidden documents, the video he had prepared, was within reach. I just had to act with patience, wit, and resolve, aware that the smallest misstep could shatter everything. The farmhouse, once a quiet retreat, had become the epicenter of a confrontation I was ready to face, armed with memory, instinct, and the invisible guidance of my son. I started by retracing Daniel's careful steps through the farmhouse, each creak of the floorboards echoing like a whispered secret. Something about the place felt alive with his presence, as if he had just stepped away and left a trail of breadcrumbs for me to follow. My eyes fell on a loose floorboard under his bedroom bed, something I hadn't noticed in years. With a tentative push, it shifted to reveal a small metal box, cool and unassuming, yet pulsing with significance. My hands trembled as I lifted it, aware that this was more than just a container. It was a repository of truth Daniel had meticulously assembled. Inside were documents, photographs, and digital media, each item carefully organized. The bank statements displayed massive transfers from shell companies, cryptocurrency transactions that defied explanation, and records that contradicted Vanessa's cheerful reassurances about Daniel's business. Photos captured her meetings with unfamiliar men, dates stamped and meticulously catalogued. My heart raced as realization dawned. Daniel had been investigating her long before his accident. He had anticipated every move, every attempt at deception, preparing a safeguard in case she ever crossed a line. I sank onto the edge of his bed, the weight of what I held settling over me. Daniel had faked his death not to vanish, but to protect me, to collect evidence that could dismantle Vanessa's carefully constructed facade. I could almost hear his voice in my memory, calm yet resolute, guiding me through the logic of his plan. The depth of his foresight, the precision of his preparations, left me awed and anxious in equal measure. How much danger had he anticipated? How many contingencies had he accounted for? Flipping through a folder of emails and digital records, I pieced together the scope of Vanessa's deception. She hadn't merely inherited assets, she had been embedding herself in Daniel's company, siphoning funds, and weaving a network that stretched far beyond what I had imagined. And Daniel had seen it all coming, building a fail-safe system, leaving me the keys to unravel it. Every page I examined reinforced the duality of my son, brilliant strategist, loving son, and silent protector. As I absorbed the evidence, a mixture of pride and apprehension settled over me. I understood that the next steps required patience, strategy, and courage. Daniel's plan wasn't merely about exposing Vanessa. It was about keeping me safe while ensuring justice would be served. My reflections shifted between grief, admiration, and a quiet determination to honor his foresight. The farmhouse seemed to hold its breath around me, shadows stretching long, carrying the promise of more revelations. I knew that this discovery was only the beginning. Somewhere within these walls or perhaps in the layers Daniel had hidden from view, lay the video he had recorded, the ultimate piece of his puzzle. The thought sent a shiver through me. The next chapter would demand every ounce of composure, every trace of memory and instinct, as I prepared to confront not just Vanessa, but the full extent of what Daniel had orchestrated. With the metal box tucked safely against my chest, I allowed myself a moment to steady my racing thoughts. The pieces were finally coming together, and I realized that my journey through grief had transformed into a path of revelation and resolve. The farmhouse, quiet and weathered, was no longer just a retreat. It was the stage for uncovering the truth Daniel had painstakingly preserved, the truth that would soon guide the next move, in collaboration with those who could bring it to light. The call from Detective Morrison crackled softly in my hand, a tether to a world I had only glimpsed through Daniel's meticulous planning. Every instruction he gave over the satellite phone reinforced a mix of anxiety and cautious exhilaration inside me. I had never imagined coordinating with federal agents would become part of my life at 68. Yet here I was, standing in the shadows of Pine Valley, clutching the evidence Daniel had left behind. As I prepared, I traced the layout of the farmhouse in my mind, recalling every corner Daniel had frequented, every hiding spot he had used. The agents would arrive from 3 directions, converging on the property with precision. But I had a role to play beyond passive observation. My understanding of the house, combined with Daniel's foresight, meant I could guide them, anticipate movements, and ensure that nothing and no one escaped unnoticed. From my perch behind a massive pine, I watched headlights pierce the gathering dusk. Vanessa's team arrived, sleek black SUVs moving deliberately along the logging road. I noted their professional efficiency, the way each operative scanned windows and doors, unaware that the woman they sought was not only prepared, but aware of their presence. My pulse quickened, not from fear alone, but from the acute awareness that Daniel's plan had brought us to this exact moment. Every precaution he had built in was coming to fruition, and my careful observation would make the difference. As the confrontation unfolded, Vanessa stepped through the porch, her confident posture faltering just slightly when her eyes landed on the evidence I carried. The subtle shift, the narrowing of her gaze, the almost imperceptible pause told me she had underestimated me. That tiny moment of realization sent a thrill through my veins, confirming that Daniel's preparations had accounted for both her cunning and my inexperience. The next minutes were a careful dance. I moved deliberately, positioning myself to remain both visible and protected, guiding the flow of the agents without drawing attention to the full scope of what I knew. I felt the tension build, the air charged with anticipation, until the moment Vanessa realized the truth. The documents, the photos, the digital evidence, they were no longer hidden. Her facade cracked, and I could sense the shift from controlled widow to desperate antagonist. I observed the agents spring into action, the culmination of hours of preparation and planning. Every movement I made was deliberate signaling, adjusting, shielding, all while maintaining the calm composure I had learned to cultivate under pressure. The culmination of fear, pride, and adrenaline coalesced as Vanessa's team was systematically contained, her confidence dissolving with each passing second. In the aftermath, I allowed myself a brief, grounding reflection, absorbing the intensity of what had occurred and the knowledge that Daniel's foresight had been extraordinary. The farmhouse, once a quiet retreat, had transformed into the stage for a decisive confrontation, a testament to planning, courage, and trust. As I watched the agents secure the area, I realized that this climax was only a prelude to reflection, understanding, and ultimately, the lessons I would carry forward from this extraordinary experience. Sitting on the back porch that evening, the sun dipping low behind the familiar suburban rooftops, I felt a rare sense of peace settle over me. Daniel, alive and well despite everything, sat beside me, his hand warm around mine. The chaos of the past week, the deceit, the danger, the near misses felt almost surreal now, like we had walked through a storm only to find calm on the other side. Watching him there, I realized how much courage, intelligence, and foresight he had poured into protecting not just himself, but me. We reflected quietly on what had transpired. The network Vanessa had built, intricate and far-reaching, was finally dismantled. My chest swelled with relief and pride, not just for the justice that had been served, but for the bond that had guided us through every peril. It struck me how ordinary moments packing for the farmhouse, noticing a warm cup of coffee, trusting instinct had become pivotal in navigating extraordinary circumstances. Daniel's planning, meticulous and almost playful in its cleverness, had turned fear into strategy. And I had learned, perhaps unexpectedly, that age and experience could be as vital as youth and training. I found myself reflecting on lessons beyond the immediate danger. Vigilance matters, yes, but so does trust in the right people, family, loyalty, and the courage to act in defense of those you love. These were the quiet powers that had carried us through. And in those moments of tension and suspense, I discovered my own resilience, a calm determination I hadn't recognized in myself before. There was a satisfaction in knowing that even someone who seemed ordinary, like me, could influence outcomes in ways that mattered. We laughed quietly at small recollections, the absurdity of thinking a simple farmhouse could be a battleground. The moments when Daniel's elaborate plans had nearly been outpaced by unpredictable reality. Humor, even in reflection, made the relief sweeter, the bond stronger. In these gentle moments, I felt both grounded and elevated, understanding the extraordinary in the ordinary, the heroism that lived quietly in love and care. As the sky darkened, I shared a mental note with anyone listening. Life can place us in unimaginable circumstances, but our choices, empathy, and vigilance define the paths we carve. Protect those we love, pay attention to subtle signs, and remember that ordinary people can be powerful agents of change when guided by courage and care. Sipping my coffee, I felt the farmhouse, the week's events, and the presence of my son coalesce into a story of resilience, strategy, and love. If you found resonance in this story, think of your own family, the lessons you might draw, and the ways you can remain vigilant, caring, and courageous. And if you feel moved, I hope you'll share this story, leave a comment, or simply reflect on what it teaches about trust, loyalty, and the quiet strength that resides in all of us.